It has been a while since I posted an update on my jackfruit seedlings. I have been quite busy this winter, training in the virtual world, mainly taking care of weeds. Gardening in the real world is great, but after many millennia, I think nothing beats a good boss fight, ninja style, to keep Alzheimer's disease at bay. If you are looking for a real and rewarding challenge, I suggest the Art of Vengeance. Basic Shinobi mode should be sufficient. This is not medical advice or online hate crime promotion. You never know. I'm in Canada. This disclaimer is probably needed when dealing with video games in a video about tropical plants. Where was I? Oh yeah. The other reason why I did not post updates on my jackfruit seedlings is that I've been experimenting with them, and many of my experiments have not been so successful. Some experiments were even resounding failures. I mostly tested the cold hardiness of jackfruit seedlings, exposure to cold wind, and direct sunlight. Only my most mature seedlings survived the vicious fall and spring of eastern Canada. If you are looking for a quick answer to the question, is it possible to grow a jackfruit tree in a very cold climate, like Canada? The short answer is maybe. The longer answer is more nuanced, so stick around if, like me, you are crazy enough to dare to try. I do not post regular updates, as it usually takes more time for a fruit tree to grow branches than an interstellar object to grow tails and anti-tails. So I suggest you subscribe so not to miss future updates. Plus, that will let me know there are also other crazy people out there. I mean on Earth. But you will also get updates on crazy things happening on and beyond Earth, while waiting for the more important updates. My most mature jackfruit seedling was planted back in 2022 when I started this channel. It was the most resilient seedling and one of the fastest growing among all the seedlings I germinated from the same fruit imported from Mexico. I quickly moved it to bigger and taller pots. About a year later, I started another batch of jackfruit seedlings. I repeated the process and kept the most healthy and vigorous seedling from this second batch. The selected seedling from the second batch grew even faster than the one from the first batch. I eventually transplanted both seedlings to 5-gallon barrels that I had turned into air pruning pots by drilling a bunch of holes. In late May 2025, just after I moved my jackfruit seedlings from the garage to the backyard, a cold snap hit. I am not sure how low the temperature dropped that night, but it must have been well below the weather forecast. I had selected the most cold-hardy jackfruit seedlings, so I was a bit surprised to see that all of them were so severely impacted. Looking back, I think I also exposed the seedlings to direct sunlight too soon. When the cold snap hit, the seedlings were already weakened. In this weakened state, at the beginning of the short Canadian growing season, the jackfruit seedlings were never quite able to fully recover over the course of the summer. It was not until I brought them back indoors in fall 2025 that some of them began to show some sign of vigor again. My two most mature jackfruit saplings responded differently. The younger and faster growing sapling from the second batch remained lethargic. The oldest jackfruit sapling from the first batch was actively growing again, but its new leaves never really looked healthy to me. Upon closer inspection of the jackfruit leaves, I realized that spider mites were starting to proliferate in the dry environment of the garage. I managed to fend off the infestation by spraying water daily. That is when I noticed a strange bud on my oldest jackfruit sapling. It must have been sometime around mid-November. I did not pay too much attention to the strange bud at first, since some of my other younger seedlings were also producing large terminal buds that usually contained a leaf and a young branch. What I found more intriguing was not the size of the bud, but the shape of it. It seemed to have some sort of deformity. My thinking was that sometimes spider mites can cause deformities on young buds and leaves. The bud kept growing bigger and more deformed. Given that it was growing on a lower branch, there was only one explanation, but I guess I was not prepared for that explanation, as the sapling was only 3 years old. The bud eventually cracked open in mid-December, wide enough for me to peek inside. There was a flower in there. I think the last time I felt that happy was when my potted soursop tree flowered for the first time a few years ago in 2024. The difference was that back then I knew it was a flower very early on because of the particular shape of the Adoniaceae flowers, like with my pawpaws. Don't get me wrong, I was also quite happy when my grafted pawpaw tree flowered for the first time earlier that year, in spring 2025. But there is something special about seeing a tropical fruit tree grown from seed flower for the first time, indoors during one of the coldest winters in recent Canadian memory, when outside temperatures were well below -20 degrees Celsius at night time. To be fair, and more scientific, jackfruit saplings usually flower when they are 3 to 4 years old. Reports of jackfruit saplings flowering less than 2 years after germination are not uncommon. I guess I was initially doubtful that it was a flower bud because my jackfruit sapling started the growing season in a pretty bad shape. Who knows, maybe some stress can promote flowering, like with citrus trees. Stress is known to sometimes set in motion survival mechanisms in animals and plants. I have briefly touched on this subject in my videos about the effect of plasma on plants. If stress had something to do with my jackfruit sapling flowering, then 2 stress factors will come to my mind. The first factor is cold temperatures. I'm not talking about extreme cold temperatures, but maybe mild cold temperatures. Be cautious if you want to experiment with this factor, as low temperatures can kill young jackfruit trees. I was lucky some of my jackfruit saplings survived the surprise late spring 2025 cold snap. The second factor is lack of water. As I mentioned earlier, I had transplanted the jackfruit to a homemade air pruning pot. With air pruning pots, the soil dries much faster. It was the spider mite infestation in the garage that made me realize I had to spray and water my jackfruit trees on a more regular basis. Jackfruit trees are known to exhibit variations in flowering time, depending on the location and cultivar. In their native areas of South and Southeast Asia, they can flower year-round. But when their growing area has distinct dry and wet seasons, like in India, jackfruit trees usually flower at the beginning of the rainy season, in June. But again, that is not always the case. For example, in Mexico, jackfruit trees typically flower in December, which is during the dry season. This shows the remarkable adaptive nature of this tree. My 3-year-old sapling comes from a Mexican jackfruit, and it flowered mid-November in the garage, a little more than a month after I brought it indoors and started to water it more regularly. I guess it's adapted to the Canadian lifestyle. One question remained. Was it a boy or a girl? Not that it really matters. Parents do not really care if their firstborn baby is going to be a girl or a boy. Do they? I better not touch this topic. But my question was referring to the flower itself, not the tree. Jackfruit trees produce 2 types of flowers, male and female, like squash plants. And just like with squash plants, male flowers usually appear first. There are actually visible cues to tell whether a jackfruit flower bud is male or female, but the flower bud on my jackfruit sapling was kind of deformed, and its flowering pattern was still a mystery to me. As the bud further opened, the reason for the deformed shape became clear. There was another oddly shaped bud inside. It quickly became clear to me that it was a male flower. No surprise there. The other bud inside could be another male flower, as female jackfruit flowers usually develop on older wood. Here is a close-up view of the flower as it was preparing to release the pollen. After opening, I think it was only a matter of days before the pollen was ready to be harvested. But I waited for about 2 weeks to let the pollen dry out on the flower. During that time, I was very careful not to touch the sapling or spray water on the flower. I also turned off the fan. Since I was not sure when the jackfruit sapling was going to produce a female flower, if ever, my idea was to harvest the pollen for long-term storage in a freezer. But for that, the pollen needs to be completely dry, or else freezing temperatures will do more harm than good. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like for more content like this. Also, subscribe and activate notifications if you don't want to miss future updates on my adventures in Jackfruit world.